HDZero has recommitted. We say recommitted because they did this a long time ago on RC groups, and we talked about it back then, but we now got a public recommitment officially from the new HDZero company and Carl directly to mostly open source. I say mostly because the ASIC design will still be closed, but everything else about the system is going to be open. The software and hardware designs needed to create and support HDZero Digital are intended to be open sourced. And he says basically they're going to get the goggle software and the goggle hardware done, completed, and sent out. And then once that's done, their goal is to develop an open source community and open source the software and hardware designs. So that's pretty cool.
That is very cool. That's very cool. I don't in any way begrudge him keeping the ASIC proprietary. That's his bread and butter, and that's where he will make his entire career selling those.
Yeah.
He has said from the beginning that he wants to do like the rich wave chip in the analog VTXs. People may not know this. I didn't know this until someone was like, hey, there's a parallel here. There's a chip in basically every analog video transmitter and video 5.8 gigahertz video receiver. It's made by a company called Richwave, and it is proprietary. And they just sell it and license it to anybody or something. And so Carl just wants HDZero to be the Richwave of digital FPV. But in order to do that, he has to get reference designs out there and make it possible for literally anyone to build hardware. All they have to do is buy his chip. And that seems to be his goal.
So I'll say one thing I would like to see from HDZero and honestly from Divimath. The one thing that I would like to see is just a public commitment to continue producing chips for maybe X amount of time, or to show that there's X amount of resources behind it. Because the one concern that I've seen that I do believe there is some basis in is that we're working off a closed source ASIC. So while there is some hardware out there, we got fairly small numbers. Madstech looked, and it's probably around 5,000 VRXs he was able to find, something like that after some official information he got. If we think about it like that, the concern is just that, hey, in a year, if Divimath kind of craps out, maybe they don't sell enough, or they want to shift to new silicon or something, and they stop producing these, there won't be any more, and then we'll kind of have a dead system like we could think about DJI doing. And so the hope is that at least there is some, I don't know, it would just be cool to see some commitment. Obviously, you don't have to stick to that, but just to know that, like, hey, we're doing all this other stuff, or hey, we have all this other business, or hey, this is this percentage, or something like that, just to give us some reassurance. But otherwise, I think this is a really great move. There's a lot of hardware already out there, and there will be a lot of hardware being sold. We've got the new VRX, we've got a new integrated goggle that's going to be coming, and all that will be based on the same, these ASICs, so that we'll now have access to the software from. And if we compare to, like, we think about the margarine route that we've seen on DJI, they have access to the core OS of the goggle, but then there's the RTOS, which is the real-time operating system that lives and controls the ASIC. And so that's flashed at the factory, and all that controls a lot of the parameters for the ASIC. And if we have full access to that now through Divimath open source, it's a lot larger of a full access to the system.
Right. So
it's super promising, and hopefully we see this fairly soon and everything play out as it's expected.
Yeah. Certainly, like, I think of the ExpressLRS ecosystem as a case where we have open source hardware and software, which would be the case, except for the ASIC, would be the case for HDZero. And we have reference designs put out there by experts who know the system inside and out, and manufacturers make third-party hardware in partnership with the with HDZero or the ExpressLRS devs, as it were. And you have sort of the best of both worlds. I think that would be an excellent model. The fact that HDZero would be a single source for the ASIC is a difference between ExpressLRS, because you've got Semtech makes the chip for the ExpressLRS receivers. Well, that's they're a gigantic company. They're not going anywhere, probably. So having a single source is a different thing. I also think I've said on the live stream that for this to really be successful, there needs to be the kind of qualities that attract open source developers and contributors. If the community and the developers the manufacturers feel like this is a case where they have open sourced it kind of in name only, but they still sort of own it, it's going to be a different story, and it's not going to attract the kind of critical mass that a project like ExpressLRS or EdgeTX does, where people look at the difference between EdgeTX and OpenTX. OpenTX is open source in every way, but it doesn't have the same level of community involvement I mean, maybe we would look at the GitHub repo and see that I'm wrong. It feels like it's, it's mostly sort of run by FreeSky to me. Whereas EdgeTX is really out there and really active.
Well, I think part of that too is the question of like, I don't know. I think we definitely will have a world where we could see an EdgeTX version of OpenTX compared to like whatever the main HDZero repo is. If there's like some branch that's like Express HD or whatever we end up getting, right? I don't think that's that crazy. So, and Dominic Clifton mentions the word, I guess the phrase we should probably use, which is life cycle duration. Says it's quite typical for IC manufacturers to offer life cycle duration. So, yeah, if there is a life cycle duration, then maybe DiviMath could provide us for the chipset. I think that would be good for manufacturers to get an understanding. And hopefully they'll do that as they release the open source and as they're discussing with manufacturers and showing these designs. So.
It really seems like there's an appetite for this system, though. And I don't know why we don't see more Foxeer, Runcam, Caddx releasing products for it. I mean, Foxeer is going to be the first to release a third-party VTX. However, I can't help but notice it basically looks, I mean, I haven't held them side by side, but it really just looks like an HDZero VTX. So I'm not sure how much they actually contributed. Whereas if you look at analog VTX, they all differ in many, many ways in their capabilities and their design. If it's just Foxeer making the same VTX that HDZero did, I'm not sure how much is being contributed, although it still would be a positive move.
Yeah, there at least was some, I'm going to guess there was at least some either learning from the Race V2 that HDZero did, or some input Foxeer had based on VTX design. Because when you compare like cap locations and resistors and stuff like that, there are quite a few changes on that Race V2. The layout is similar, but a lot of the other placement of parts is different. So I wonder how much input they had on that and how much change that'll be.
Yeah, well, we shall see. Carl has said that he is not good at designing VTXs and he wants someone else who knows what they're doing to do it for him.
You know, they don't have the hardware experience. You know, they're getting it from doing this, but they don't want to do that. So,
we got one more comment here from Aaron Roseberry who says, so DiviMath started making hardware and pushed Fatshark out and now realizes it's really hard and that's why Fatshark was taking so long to release the more powerful VTX. I'm not sure there's any part of that I actually agree with, respectfully, Aaron. Where do you want to start with that?
I think what happened was, I don't know, the whole time since RC groups, you know, and we've shown these comments, the goal has always been HDZero will make hardware because somebody needs to make hardware. And if Fatshark's not going to make the hardware, we're going to make the hardware because someone needs to make it as a platform to prove that it needs to be there, basically. You know, we need somebody to put these in hands and then also to prove that these should be in hands and that in the future, when we want to get these manufacturers on this open source train and building parts for this stuff, there's a reason to. And so I think that's why we're where we're at. And that's why we're seeing the progression we're at. You know, they've lined us up with some VTX designs and we've got a new VRX from them. We're going to have a specific goggle from them. And then that will pass on to this open source ecosystem, hopefully. To me, it makes perfect sense if you're trying to sell ASICs. That you're going to do as little of this hardware work as possible. And you're going to try Fatshark first and see if Fatshark can handle it. And when Fatshark doesn't roll with the ball, you've got to pick it up.
I think I don't think that either you or I have any information that would let us judge whether Fatshark pushed DiviMath out or HDZero, or whether DiviMath pushed Fatshark out. I'm sure that like any business disagreement or personal disagreement, there's many different angles you could see that from.
I can tell you that my understanding is that Fatshark decided to do the fire sale in the VRX. So to me, that is an indicator, right?
What does that indicate?
Like, Fatshark was done with the system and they want it out. Like,
interesting,
right? Because
it wasn't moving. It wasn't moving fast enough.
Correct. Yeah, it wasn't moving fast enough, or they just didn't think it was a viable product, and they fire saled the last 1,500 of them, or whatever that comment said, right? On Madstech's page.
Interesting.
So, to me, like if you look at how that worked, like it wasn't HDZero cutting all the costs for those VRXs. And if that's the case, then the only reason Fatshark would do that is because they're like, all right, we're done. This isn't working. We're out.
Well, it did work out that way. They fire saled those VTs. And the story was that it was not a fire sale and they were not getting out. This was what we were told. And of course, you have to take those things at their word unless there's evidence otherwise. The story was that they was just trying to, build the user base. And then Fatshark was like, you know what, actually forget about it.
I was going to say, clearly when you fire sale them for way cheap and then you don't do another run, there is an indication of like, hey, there wasn't a point in this, right? Or there was, but you just want to get rid of it.
I mean, I do think that HDZero has done an admirable job of getting hardware out there, especially given that it's not their area of expertise. And if you told me, like my read on it was that Fat Shark was not moving fast enough for HDZero, that Carl wants to move fast and Fat Shark is very conservative and doesn't want to move fast. And like that to me is consistent with what I know about those two people. So anyway, we get that good? Is that enough about that? Good luck, HDZero. Go open source, manufacturers, start working on it. I got 90,000 views on my HDZero freestyle video, which it's big numbers for my channel. And considering that there are approximately 2,000 to 5,000 VRXs sold worldwide, to have 90,000 views tells you how interested people are in this system.